they would, you know, if we would make them so they didn't, because I don't want to have to rearrange property lines, because I know Hendricks does own the property to the north, but I don't want to go that route if I don't have to.
So it's the same owner of both properties?
Yes.
But your drawings currently show the balconies hanging over the property line.
Okay.
You agree? I mean, they do.
If they do, that was a misdraw. We will not have them overhang the property line.
Well, that's why I brought it up. So thank you for your answer on that. One of the things, I know we're not going to get involved into the design, but for purposes, because you had raised this in your beginning statement, we've seen option A and option B. It's not up here now, but one was the wood carving area on the corner. You were
Yes.
talking about wood.
Yep.
Then there was the lighter shade of almost a
Yeah, we had like a
off-green-
navy and burgundy color option, and then also like a soft green color.
soft green color. And that was on the office side. right?
Yes, those were
So
both
that
on
was,
the office.
those were the changes that were made from the first couple of renderings, right?
Yes, yes.
I didn't see any of that in the second, the residential. Was there some reason that wasn't done?
Well, we did alter some of the colors of the lower wood at the residential building. You can see there it's a lot lighter than it used to be. Before it was almost a dark navy almost color back there. So that did get lighter on the back as well.
I know one of the things I just mentioned to, I think, Rob at the time of our last meeting in April was whether or not he was amenable to changing some of the colors, which you just did in
Yes.
office colors. And then also, but I wasn't limiting it to the office, it was the residential.
Yep.
And with the railings there being as dark as they are,
Yep.
is there any possibility down the road for that to be discussed any further about lightening that part of it up a little bit?
Oh, the railings and detailing on the outside of the building?
and-
Sure. Yeah,
and
we'd
what-
be open to looking at
And what
that.
about the actual color scheme of those red bricks?
Well, we pulled that from a lot of the red brick that is in Delafield. So we're trying to, tie in with those types of things, the paneling, the red brick color, the Cream City brick, try to really keep that, so it looks like a consistent building for the city.
Well, I just think that, that's been sort of consistent. I know there's been some minor changes there, but nothing as significant as office change.
Correct.
So when we're
We
looking
felt
at,
that the building on the front, the Genesee Street elevation was the one that seemed to be, to everyone, the building that had the most objection.
well, yeah, it was the primary focus because of its location, but it ties into also the same, some of the issues raised by the commission in all other hearings. So I want to just get that on the table so
Yep.
we can talk about this further when we're analyzing the subject of these three issues: height, stories, setback, and whether or not, when a vote is taken, any vote would be subject to approval of the design.
There's, of course, a lot of options we can look at. One of the things, we added that tall wood piece on the east building. That's definitely things we can incorporate into the residential building as well. Maybe perhaps more wood, and those are things we can talk about.
Well, I think that's something we should be looking at down the road. But I think from the standpoint of what we're talking about here right now is a way to get an understanding of what the real facts are, what the amount of the setback is, and how much the height is, and then we can take a vote on those issues, all with the understanding that the design is not in that vote. It's going to be subject to the
Yep,
design
we're
approval.
aware that-
Because I think I want you to understand from, and I've been doing this for some time now, and I defer to my colleagues here who are everybody spent a lot of time on this. But we have too, a lot of time. And the goal here is that I think it's a really valuable, great project that has incredible legacy for the city, and it has to show the charm of the city. That's been my theme ever since this case came up. And I'm a trial lawyer, so I always have some sort of theme going. Well, this is the theme from my end. But I think it's also, that fits in with compatibility and all the other issues, whether it's historical or not, whether it's Gimbel's old department store, or you call it a turn of the century, or we're talking about it in what Delafield is unique. So what I've told you, and I told Rob at the last meeting, Kent has done a great job, Kent Johnson, in trying to work with you and getting this step by step. And I'm optimistic that it can continue to go that way. But I want everybody to understand here that this commission is very supportive of good projects and reasonable, deliberate processing of those projects, because we want it to be done. And this is not an absence of leadership from our end in this commission in terms of business and development and growth. You have to measure it in reasonable steps, working all different things together. We are an independent body here, but we have taken a lot of time on this. We really value your input, and especially Kent's from my end. So no matter what happens tonight, we still want to collaborate here to get this resolved, and if that requires another meeting and further discussion, I'm open to that.
So I just have one question I've been trying to reconcile with the drawings and the pictures, and maybe you guys can just give me some clarity on it, but particularly at this angle, when I look at the elevations that you have, there's only about, correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, but at that garage door opening, on the elevations, I'm only showing about a 2-foot differential between the road and where you go into the garage. But when I look at these pictures, it seems to be so much lower. I'm just trying to understand why it almost looks like the top of the door is at the road, but yet the floor of the garage on the drawings is showing about 2 feet below the road.
That's one of actually, it's right within a foot of the center line elevation on Dobkin Street. And I think what we need, Pete, is some clarification as to, and some coordination between yourself and R.A. Smith. Is there a ramp going into so you're ramping down?
Correct.
Okay, because the way the engineering is presented, it's pretty much a consistent grade, which would, unfortunately, from this view, bring the building even higher.
So here's the difficulty with artistic renderings, is that
They're artistic.
Well, this picture is, I physically was out there taking this photograph from so far back that the sight line, the grade starts dropping off as you go away from this building as well. So I'm forced to look up at this building. So with the grade kind of coming up and coming back down over Dobkins there, it's a tough angle. And I would rely on R.A. Smith and the grading numbers as more solid, than rendering.
So in my mind, when I see the contradiction, in my mind, I just want to take that street and lower it mentally to where I think the bottom of that garage door would be, and that's how much of the building I would see. Is that a reasonable?
So according to my surveyor's numbers here, basically at the curb going down on Dobkins, I'm at 892.5, and my basement floor is 891.83. So yeah, if we were to look straight on at that elevation, you probably would see a lot more of that door.
I'd see, just from that angle, not the other angle,
Right.
but from that, I'd see pretty much 5 stories just from that angle.
From that side of the street, because it also drops as you head towards the north as well, because we're bringing up, we need to maintain that higher grade for those entrance on that would be the west side of the building. We need to be at grade.
Yeah, so you're gonna have a good-sized retaining wall in there.
We will probably have a retaining wall.
Because it needs
yes.
to hold the dirt up to keep it
Correct.
level with the
And
entrance to the
because we
retail
also have
shops.
parking underneath there as well,
Right,
so that we need to maintain ceiling heights and things like that, so,
Keep
yes.
in mind from this angle, that on the west side of Dobkins, it comes up to where the fish hatchery line.
Oh, for
So
sure.
the sidewalk and everything, so that's part of why you're not seeing the full garage door from this angle, in addition.
Well, if I'm standing on Dobkin Street, though, I mean, it's a 2-foot drop, basically, to
Yeah, I
the
mean,
bottom floors, you have it drawn.
I'm happy
Or a
to
foot.
send you an elevation, right from being standing at Dobkins, showing you what that would look like, if
I
that's
think,
something that would help.
and I think it would help in consideration of the building height, is if this garage door entrance is flanked by 2 retaining walls, and you're able to bring soil up against the base of the building here to disguise this lowest
That would be
elevation.
another option.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly pull that grade around and continue it around. That's certainly something that could happen.
Well, in regards to the height of the building and setbacks and these other, the 3 parameters we're talking about, the floors, height of the building, and setback, a I'll just want to, like, mentally, as I've gone through this consideration, going back to last summer, and then some education we've had recently on how our code's been interpreted in the past, and we reviewed that in our last Plan Commission meeting. Some of that perspective came from the standpoint of reading our code, the 35 feet for a flat roof building for height, and you get an extra 10 feet if you set it back 20 feet, gives us a 45-foot building. And then, so my question was to staff, and, how did Delafield Square get built?
Delafield Square Mall.
Delafield Square Mall. Because it's depending on which report you read, it's between 50 and 54 feet tall.
I can tell you it's at least 54 feet tall because I did the drawings on it, so.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's similar, it's close to the height of these things. And it's a flat roof building. And so really the question was, and the reason that drawing exists in our packet with the sight lines and the 55 foot as a target, was to challenge, okay, given the most liberal interpretation of our ordinances and setbacks, what would be the target for Hendricks to hit on this? And I think they were directed to try and pin down a building at 55 feet as high as they could go. I don't know if that's what they were told point blank. That's what our drawing showed in our last Plan Commission meeting, and depending on how you count the whatever, then that's a different subtlety in our laws, what counts the parapet or not. And so, but they're saying the building's at 55 feet tall. But however the code was interpreted or ignored for Delafield Square Mall, with or without the changes in Act 67, 2017, but clearly our education and that on what's allowable from this body based on state law and state statutes is that we can't approve this, even if we love it, without changing the code. And the code we're talking about changing is how and when to allow a special exception to make this happen. All right. So, I appreciate the updates and the change and the options you've presented. I think the wood adds a lot, and it brings into perspective, and the reference points to not the cube, but having an architectural feature on the corner, I think helps. And and the surface parking combined with the below ground parking are all positive steps. And this is a tough decision to just green light without serious deliberation, because we've got, and I appreciated all the input that we had from everybody. I've got people I respect enormously on both sides of this. But I think from the technical aspects of it, as far as what we need to do to make it happen, if we chose to do that, that's clear to me. I mean, you've spelled it out based on the actions we need to take for height, setback, and number of floors. And all three of those were done for the building immediately to the south. I think that's the kind of perspective, I mean, we all need to keep in mind as far as, and what we'd be doing is making what has happened in the past legal to either continue doing or not do it so it's not legal. So I mean, I just wanted to share that. That's kind of the exercise I've gone through over the past few months in digesting this, because I thought the code was clear, and the way it's been enforced in the past and with some clarifications recently to the law, it's still clear, it just doesn't apply the way it used to.
I do have a quick question, just for clarity on our part. I know we're asking for an additional floor, and I know we're asking for height, but I don't quite understand why we're asking for a setback, if we're a zero setback property.
It's in combination with the height, to try to get the additional height. The part of the code that talks about getting an extra foot for 2 feet applies to the calculation for height for setback, therefore it's included.
But our building
But
doesn't.
the CBD one at 35
Right.
feet has no setback requirements. Now, it's not to say somebody would build a 3-story building a foot from the edge of the lot. That might not be practical for its use. That might not be practical. Is it allowed? Sure. But would somebody actually do that? Would that be a benefit for somebody to do that?
Okay, thank you.
I think, and I don't know if you have anything other than say, but one of the final things I want to say about what just Tim reiterated is, and I think it's important to know, is that if we do eventually could reach an agreement on these issues of height and stories and setback, and subject to the issue about design, I think everybody should understand that I don't think we as a body have ever been opposed to this idea from the beginning. And so people think somehow that we were opposed to it. It's been kicked the can down the street. No, we've been taking a lot of due diligence to evaluate and try to offer our input into what could make sense out of all of this. So the design, the business, generating other business coming into the community, whether the design is what you like there is a Gimbel's store, or what we like there is something out of Italy, that's not going to be bringing the people in. So that's kind of a red herring to talk about us not wanting business in. We do want business in. If it's a question of design, design isn't going to take somebody to come in and say, how much do I have to pay rent for this office space? They want to know, how much do I have to pay rent for the office space? They're not concerned about the design. So we have to get this thing focused here. The design is not the, if the design is the issue, fine, that's for architectural and aesthetic purposes. But that's not the factor that would be bringing in their business or dealing with these issues of fear that it's going to go somewhere else. It's the building itself, to provide the service, to have people use it and have customers use it, and it's not going to be dictated by what design it is. So I disagree. I think the point of the story is, if we can agree on the other portions, height and stories and setback, and then we got to agree on a design, I think that's where a lot of the commission has been focusing on, trying to work an update evaluation when we've seen, especially in the office one that's been designed with options 1 and 2, a big improvement from our standpoint, looking at it down the road. I just wanted to point that out because I think we get sidetracked on, all of a sudden we're opposed to it.
So each commissioner is supposed to get 2 turns to speak at a maximum of 10 minutes. I think you're full.
Okay, I'm done.
So
I just want to make sure that that's laid out clearly.
I have a question about the horizontal. For every 2 feet horizontal, you get 1 foot in height. Where does that come from? Is that part of the
That's directly out of the code. And,
are there other communities that don't have that same rule? I mean, if we move that to 1.2, that would give you the height and the setback.
well, we have the ability to make it anything that we'd like. Other communities do have comparable ordinances to allow for additional height in combination with additional setback, yes.
And then the maximum of 45, Tim brought up that's already been blown beyond with the building right next to it.
Correct.
So those are all 3 of the issues.
Yeah, it was blown, it was given an exception.
Given an exception,
right?
yes, but-
Not on all sides, but on the one side, basically, where they abutted their own property, which would be similar to this building, the residential building here. But unlike the building, the commercial building, it doesn't have a 50-foot setback. It only has a 20 and I believe an 11. That doesn't fall within any of the exceptions that prior planning commissions have allowed. So it's different. The residential building would generally say has fallen within the exceptions that was given for General Square Mall. However, the commercial building, I mean, it's clearly, we just don't have anything like that close.
And this is really the last big buildable space we have downtown.
Oh, gosh, no.
No?
No.
Bigger.
There's many other if we change the code and we allow larger stories, there's certainly other properties that could be, building could be knocked down. Redeveloped.
Yeah.
And then you'd have 4-story buildings with whatever, code amendments that we would make. Whether it's the Hendricks Group or somebody else, that will be the new precedent. That will be, if viable to the developer, they'll be doing more of it.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with changing codes or ordinances. I feel that it's like a dominoes effect for me. And it would change the whole downtown district if we change the code and what's allowed. Personally, I would stick with the code and say that these are the parameters, this is what you need to work within.
We were just talking about changing a code to solve a problem for all the walkout basements. So I mean,
Yeah, but-
it's very similar,
We're talking about a whole district.
but that's the whole city. So the part of our discussion from last month was, and some of the, when someone's developing in an area, they're going to say, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything bigger than what's right across the street. And it's pretty close to what they're doing, and we're saying, no, you can't. Because today we're going to follow the code, even though we didn't in the past. And I get that. That's kind of the slippery slope argument that you just mentioned. And so in the past, it seems like there's been decisions based on precedent. And if you want to legitimize, so, to focus on what we're doing here tonight, it's, if the proposal's favorable, we would be putting in place a recommendation to change the code to allow special exceptions, not change the code. We're actually doing something the state law allows us to do. We've done it in other sections of our code for special exceptions. We just never legitimized what's been practiced in the city in the past. And so, I'd like us to get our brain around whether or not we'd ever want to have another building like Delafield Square in the city or not, or whether we'd want to enable buildings like this or not. Because if the answer is no, we should just stop right now. So that's how the questions are phrased to us tonight, and I think that the discussion should really be on the merits of what's in front of us, because we can enable it if we want to.
But in the process of enabling it, you create a vehicle of exception in the future.
Correct.
That can be used by others, that's all I'm saying.
Correct.
But that's always there, isn't it? Just because of that Act 67, at any time we could
The Act
make
67 says that if you're
exception.
going to make exceptions, you have to detail what they are.
But
And
even
our
if we
current
don't,
code doesn't have exceptions.
but if another development were to come in a year from today and we really liked it, we could go in and change that code and grant a special exception. You
No.
can do that anytime,
No,
right?
no. And again, this is getting to the legal part of it, but once you list height as an exception to the code, then in the future, that is something that can always be accepted, or changed, not followed in the code for any future development. So it's the specific
understand
code
that.
change of height.
What I'm
It
saying
makes a
is-
variable in the future.
If we don't do a code amendment for this development, we could still do a code amendment a year from now or 2 years from now, right?
Well,
Just
once you
what we're
do the
talking
code
about today,
amendment.
if we felt another one came in and we said, well, we really like that, but we're gonna have to do a code amendment to go
But you'd
with
only do
that.
the code, I just want to make sure I'm being clear. You only do the code amendment once.
I
And it would be
understand
for
that.
height.
I'm saying if we don't do it today for
we don't
this
do it.
development, the option is always there to do
Oh,
it.
there's always an option to do a
Right.
code amendment.
We could do it.
Absolutely, yes.
So your point is that if we do it now, it's always gonna be there.
It will. The
But
option
you
to
could
change
always
the
have
height.
the option at any time. Am I making sense?
So the option to do it is always there.
It's always there. It's always there.
It's not, I get it. It's just not a variable we're allowed to use today, but if we
I
make the
understand.
code amendment, we can change it in the future. We change the height, or the setback, or the number of floors.
Then why have a code?
I know.
To avoid this. So if something fits the code, you can just go to Scott and you build the building, right?
It's true.
All right, what other
I-
planning commissioners have questions or?
I have-
Question.
go ahead.
Does Hendricks own the property to the north, all the properties along that way?
Yes.
Are setbacks used, I know they're used in different ways. One is so you don't encroach on somebody else's property,
Correct.
is one basic use. So we're looking at the same landowner on the north wanting to do something on this parcel here. So our setbacks that, I'm not minimizing them, believe me, are they that critical that we're worried about a foot or two? And I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to minimize the code, I'm not in any way, shape, or form. Because obviously I think Hendricks would say, yeah, it's okay to come up where you want to come up. I look at this and I like what I see in a lot of ways. I hear a lot of the people out there and what they had to say, and it makes a lot of sense. I understand that, probably the bigger thing is the fourth floor on there. The code does not address a parapet roof. It doesn't. And, that would have to be something, I think, that if we're going to talk about code changes, amendments, we need to add these types of features in there to address it, because actually, I'll look at it and be a devil's advocate and say, well, it doesn't address it, so we're okay. We can put that up, it's not a problem, because it does not state that in your code. But that, I doubt they would, want to do something like that. I'm looking at this in a lot of different ways. And I'm almost thinking, are we trying to split that hair too fine for what's really written and what is being proposed?
I think the setback does matter because that building next to it could be sold at any time to
They could-
someone else,
The truth is, they could sell all the buildings and somebody else could come in here.
Right.
Or they could take this
But I meant
development and go
individually?
to another community with
Or
it.
you
It could
could,
be sold
you know,
individually. though.
couldn't you,
I wouldn't want to see that.
could you,
You guys
could
you can't.
could you combine all the lots, you own all the property, couldn't you just do a CSM and you eliminate all the setbacks for the entire property?
That's true to the south.
Right. Oh, okay.
I mean, the hotel property and it's all one big,
B-Fitness and.
yeah.
yep.
And have your own plaza there.
So they could have 8 buildings a foot apart if,
Yeah, I mean,
so
we're-
setbacks would be eliminated if you did
Yeah,
a CSM.
correct.
They own the property, I think it's really focused, enabling it or not is more focused on the criteria for a conditional use and whether we'd want to enable it, and that's what it does to the value of the neighboring properties, noise, dust, traffic, property values,
Utilities.
correct?
Yes.
Is that all of it?
Pretty close. You might have missed one or two.
Utilities compatibility.
Utilities compatibility with surrounding architecture and things like that.
I just have one question. Have you considered at all having the residential building at a different height than the office height?
It is actually shorter than the office building.
I mean, stories-wise, number of stories, like 4 versus 3?
We originally had the office building, one of our first proposals was actually for 5 stories, and that was at 4. We just feel the numbers work better at 4 stories there.
So you wouldn't be amenable to
I mean, we
4?
have 3 stories of residence and then 1 story of office/business.
Right. So having 4 residential and 3 office stories, that wouldn't be under your consideration, or you have given that any thought?
That would be a tough question to answer right now. I would have to
Yeah.
talk with my client, but yeah.
What I would suggest to the commission, I've been thinking about this probably way too much, but there's a lot of questions here without a lot of answers, but a lot of effort is being made by you, namely you, Pete, and Kent, and everybody else in your staff, and also by the commission. And given the zoning code issues and the leverage things that you've talked about, what you're getting, the underground parking and the outside parking in exchange for the setback, some things are consideration as kind of a negotiation process. I guess I would suggest maybe that process be continued, and we'd be better advised to make that final decision on these 3 questions or 6 questions at the next meeting. In the interim, try to resolve this matter in its entirety.
We're going to vote on the 6 questions tonight.
I'm just, that's my suggestion.
Yeah, what action, like what changes, what changes would you want to see?
I would find the changes we talked about in terms of, well, I just asked the question that you couldn't tell me, is 4 stories on one building and 3 on the other. We've talked about the design issues.
That's actually one of the questions. is in an apartment, a residential building, would you vote for or against the
Yeah,
waiver
so you can
for 4
treat
stories or
each building separately, and you can vote however you think is appropriate for this applicant with this proposal. So if you'd like to see the residential building, you think that where it sits, what benefits it brings is okay at 4 stories at that height with that setback, then make the appropriate votes. But if you look at the commercial building and you have a different opinion, then vote whether you want to make the exception for 4 stories there, the setbacks, and the total height.
Yeah, but then you could have a split verdict.
You could.
And where's that going?
It's gonna,
Go to
it
the
gives the applicant clear direction, and it gives the planning, the city council, the planning commission's interpretation of this application and how the exceptions might be considered by them, the code amendments, at the city council level.
I can actually answer that question for you. We would not do 3 stories in the back.
Okay, so you've answered it.
On the
No,
residential
no,
building?
no, we're talking about 4 on the residential and 3 on the office.
Okay, we wouldn't do that either.
So you won't do either? What was that?
You drop 2 units off that top 4th floor. The back 2 units to lower that. What's the setback on the west?
On Dopkins, we're talking about?
5 feet.
5 feet?
It's pretty short.
Would you drop 2 units?
Well,
Then you have a 4-story building.
yeah, I mean, it would definitely alter the look that we're going for on the project. Obviously.
You have to deal with that.
What's that?
You have to deal with that.
I know I do. And, but it would be, that's one of those things that I would have to take a look at that would really drastically change what that building would look like, having just part of it not be 4 stories.
I mean, that's an option on either building. You can do a partial story to increase your setback. You can change that into that partial floor into, an advantage. Maybe a restaurant could go on the top of the commercial building with an outside patio and stuff. There are options that one could look at it as a negative, or one could look at it potentially as a positive.
We did actually have some plans earlier with that type of layout, and the problem we run into is just access to that 4th floor for a commercial, like a restaurant where we would need that many people, and then we have to increase the number of stairs on the inside because, a restaurant space is gonna hold a lot more people in a condensed amount of time. So those types of things do affect the building design throughout the whole thing too, so. But we can talk with our client about it.
All right. So, any other questions, or are we ready to start making one of the 6 motions?
We got one more question.
And whatever, if any motion is to approve, I remind you that it must include the request of a code amendment.
He has a question.
Bob had a question.
Yeah, my question was just around the setback from the Genesee Street to the building.
Yes.
Can that be moved a little bit, or is there any wiggle room in that space? to
Well,
move it back?
what we're trying to do between the 2 buildings is maintain an area that will be used. If we get too tight in there, it's gonna kind of become a little bit of a wind tunnel, and it won't really get a lot of sun. So that's something we can look at, maybe tightening that up a little bit. But,
I mean, shifting the building back and reducing that open
Yeah.
space in between the buildings?
Correct.
Reducing it or getting rid of it, because it's gonna be in the shade most of the time. But what I'm trying to get at is if we can get the setbacks far enough that we can maybe move the code a little bit to make it work on height and setback. And then we just have to rule on floors. That's what I'm thinking.
we would have to touch those 2 buildings at that point. And then that kind of plaza on Genesee Street gets to be 30 extra feet, and then all of a sudden that becomes a space that's not very welcoming, because it's just too big.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I restate my position. I think we should offer them the opportunity to come back in a month.
Yep.
Just to expound on that.
Guys, please.
Just to expound on that, we have an obligation to take action within a certain period of time. The applicant has already granted us an extension to get to this point. We need to take action this evening unless it is their desire to extend it.
That's why I said it the way I did.
So if we were to go through the 6 motions and it were to pass, now is our opportunity to talk about other things that we'd want as far as conditions on the property moving forward, right? I mean, when else would we do it? If talking about, I mean, there's certain things about CBD. One, do they apply like fast food or those types of restrictions? Are those inherent in our code, or do we need to spell those out?
No, those are integral to the elements of the conditional use. So if we get past the 6 special exceptions for the bulk and location of the building, then you also have a discussion in regards to any other elements that would be incorporated into the conditional use. Your special exceptions this evening, if they move forward, will be elements of they'll be rolled into the conditional use.
Okay, and the conditional use would then be drafted for us to finalize, or would we be essentially setting out the parameters and they'd be done?
You can be setting out the parameters now if you like.
All right, so I guess let me just ask that question. Would you be okay with just not allowing franchise fast food restaurants in your first floor marketplace? I mean,
Yes.
all right. And how about on the residential side? You're planning on these being condominiums?
Correct.
And are you good with them being contingent upon our review and approval of the declarations and bylaws? What I'm getting at is I'm concerned about use, noise, aesthetics, noise on balconies, times that you'd be setting parameters for residents, and it'd be focused on impact to the exterior.
You don't want Christmas
facade.
lights on the balconies?
It's a problem, like beach towels, laundry, stuff like that. I'm assuming that would be incorporated in some way in your.
Yeah, we'd be open to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also open to incorporating the conditional use, maybe I don't have the right phrase here, but the condominium bylaws and ownership documentation that basically says that, here's the rules for the ownership in the condos. It would help me to be sure that these aren't going to be apartments, and by having the covenants, is that the right word I'm looking for?
Mm-hmm.
For the condominiums as part of the conditional use. So if somebody wanted to change it out of condos, it would have to come back to the city for approval. Is that of any objection?
No, most communities that we work in, we have to submit condo documents and things like that, so unless Kyle, corrects me here, I don't see a problem that we could come together with some sort of agreement.
No, I mean, that's fine. Are you talking about limiting a resident or an owner of the condo and their ability to rent it as well? I mean, to the ability that we can control that, we will. But.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, you set up whatever rules you want there. My main goal is just make sure they're owned condos, right? And I assume you're going to have a similar setup on the commercial side, though. That it's going to be like a commercial condo, and you're going to sign a lease with them, right? And there's going to be an agreement that you're going to use.
Correct.
Roger, do we have to use the 1742 paren 3 on the Delafield code related to the criteria for conditional use when we're just dealing with the exception at this time?
With the exceptions, I would suggest no, but certainly with a motion to recommend the conditional use, then yes, you must.
And we have to consider all the criteria on just these 3 or 6 questions.
You should consider that criteria, but it does not need to be part of your motion to approve or.
Because then we're dealing with design issues, compatibility
Correct.
issues that are all in 17.42, which we've separated and segregated to down the road. If this is approved, then it's subject to approval on design, which goes right to the essence of compatibility with the aesthetic property around it.
Correct.
And so, my point is, how are we going to do that without discussing that?
I would suggest any of your action this evening should be contingent upon a final approved development plans, which would incorporate all of those elements of compatibility and impact to neighbors.
And aesthetics.
Right. Yeah, you
'Cause I
have that. Essentially, what you're doing is allowing them to respond to your direction this evening, come back for finalized development plans with the assurance that they have a conditional use that's going to move forward.
Yeah, so just so everybody understands, I don't think you can vote under 1742 paren 3 considering all the criteria when you don't have it yet. So it has to be limited to the special exception and not specifically addressing 17.42, but reserving that opportunity to be reviewed in the event it's approved and subject to further review of the conditions under 1742.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to make a motion for a code amendment to allow for a residential building height of 55.3 feet in excess of the CBD 1 building height limitation of 35, municipal code 17.3918LA.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
And discussion?
I would only ask that that motion include subject to review of the design under 17.42 paren 3 criteria for conditional use at a future time.
Can somebody make an amendment also, please, about requiring a code amendment review by council?
I'm speaking very slowly, please.
This is a recommendation to the council, is that
Yes.
correct?
Oh, okay. And this would be recommended to council.
Requiring a code amendment.
Right, yeah, I said required.
It needs to be specifically in the motion.
Yeah, I did. First
Yeah,
I said a code amendment.
This is on the office building?
No, the residential building.
Number 1 we're taking up right now.
Discussion?
One point I'd like to make is that this isn't settling this right now. This is sending it to another body for approval of all these same things.
That's right. It's starting the code amendment process. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Please, ayes, raise your hands. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
I'd like to make a motion, code amendment to relax residential building setback requirements imposed by 17.153 and accept the setbacks as proposed on the site plan dated May 29, 2019. I recommend the same to council.
As a code amendment.
As a code amendment, yeah.
Second.
Same discussion earlier, subject to further review under 17.42 paren 3 of the Delafield Code related to the criteria for conditional use, which includes compatibility and aesthetics.
Just so I'm clear in my head, are we making that an amendment to the motion?
Yes.
Okay, so does the first accept that?
Yes.
Does the second accept that?
Sure.
Okay. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Abstentions? Passes.
I'd like to make a motion, code amendment, to waive the 3-floor limitation of 17.39 LC and allow 4 floors as proposed for the residential building and recommend the same as the council.
And Jim?
Subject to approval and review and approval of the section 17.42, paren 3 of the Delafield Code related to conditional use, including but not limited to compatibility and aesthetic issues related to the design of the project.
Dan?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
One little point, just want to bring this up. If it would be possible, any building beyond 45 feet or 3 stories would have underground parking, something to consider.
We'll develop standards.
Yeah, so that would end up being part of the
Code amendment.
code amendment that we'd be requesting.
Yes. Does the first accept that
Yes.
amendment? Does the second?
Yes.
Just on those, the subject too, it's always been a review by the Plan Commission. That is, we will review that for the design on all 3 motions.
Yes, but he's making it part of the code amendment,
Yes,
so.
just so the conditional use review under 1742 is by the Plan Commission, this body.
Okay.
That applies to all 3 of those motions.
Sally, was that underground parking or indoor parking?
Underground.
Okay.
All right, seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstentions? Passes.
I'd like to make a motion for a code amendment to allow the office building height of 57.5 feet in excess of the CBD1 building height limitation of 35 feet, municipal code 17.39, 18LA.
Jim?
Subject to approval by the Planning Commission based on the criteria under 17.42 paren 3, paren of the Delafield Code related to and including but not limited to compatibility and aesthetic qualities and the overall design of the building in question.
And recommend to the common council.
Yep.
Okay.
Is there a second? Seeing no second, the motion
Second.
is. Oh, okay. You guys better speak up.
Waiting for someone else, but
Okay, who was that? Who?
I seconded it.
Okay. Discussion. Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Passes.
I'd like to make a motion for a code amendment to relax the office building setback requirements imposed by municipal code 17.153 and accept the setbacks as proposed on the site plan dated May 29, 2019, and recommend to council.
Subject to approval by the Plan Commission to the design factors and criteria under conditional use set forth under 17.42 paren 3, including but not limited to issues of aesthetics and compatibility and overall design of the project by the Planning Commission.
And recommend to council.
And recommend to council, sorry.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Passes.
I'd like to make a motion for a code amendment to waive the 3-floor limitation of 17.39 LC in the municipal code and allow 4 floors as proposed for the office building, and recommend the same to council.
Subject to approval by the Plan Commission following the use of the evaluation of the criteria of conditional use under 17.42 paren 3 paren concerning the including but not limited to compatibility and aesthetics and overall design of the project, and recommend to council.
I'll second.
Bob seconds.
And that all is as a code amendment, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Abstentions? Passes. Roger, any further discussion or action needed on this item?
There is. Now that we've made it through the special exceptions, I would encourage Plan Commission to deliberate and make a recommendation to council in regards to the conditional use application for multifamily in the CBD 1 district and any other concerns that may have been discussed this evening. Yes, it's required, multifamily in the CBD one requires conditional
Right,
use.
yeah. But it is within the ordinance.
Yes.
As a exception or conditional use.
Yes.
Okay.
This is where if you want to.
Yeah,
Restrictions.
So I'll make a recommendation to approve the residential and office buildings contingent upon no fast food franchise restaurants being able to operate in either food court, a restaurant, or first floor retail, and the approval contingent upon review and approval of the condominium declarations, bylaws, and covenants by the Plan Commission, and recommend to council of the same.
Tim, can you give me the last part again, please, about the condo with?
Condominium declarations, bylaws, and covenants.
And what was the last part after that? Was there anything? that-
Recommend to council. And this is all contingent on those 6. Not adding that to my motion, I'm just making it.
Second.
I would again, subject to approval by the Plan Commission of the criteria under section 17.42 paren 3 related to compatibility and aesthetics of the project and its overall design. So it's conditioned by that.
I'm fine with that.
Second agree?
Second agrees.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes unanimous. Anything else?
Let's do it again.
You can go home and watch it then.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 7, zoning and ordinance revisions. Seeing none, unless you got some, Roger. Item 8A, clerk, planning commission meeting dates and deadlines. Meeting July 31st, 2019. Meeting submittal deadline, July 16th, 2019. Public hearing submittal deadline, July 1st, 2019. We're almost done.
Yep.
A2, correspondence. B, planners report.
Better make those
Nothing at this time.
colored.
8C, building inspector.
Nothing to report.
The meeting is now adjourned. Seeing no further business. Thank you all.
So Tim, don't we have to, because